In 1982, Doctor Who had many behind-the-scenes changes. The most obvious of these changes is that leading actor Tom Baker steps down after playing the titular character for 7 years, being the longest any actor has been in the role. So enter Peter Davison, who is fresh off All Creatures Great and Small, now has been cast as the Time Lord. Now this was quite controversial, as Davison was 29 years old, being the youngest Doctor of the time, and there was an outrage that such a young actor was going to play a role who was mainly made up of older, wiser men. Not only was it a big change, but now to join with the relatively new producer, John Nathan Turner, is two script editors, being Anthony Root and Eric Saywood. For the first story, Castrovalva, Eric Saywood was the one to script edit it, and they would switch being script editor every other story. Before I get into the review of the story, there's a bunch of context that needs to be explained prior. So this is the third part to an unofficial trilogy, which the DVDs call The New Beginnings, which the former two parts, The Keeper of Traken and Logopolis, were in the previous season. Since I'm not covering them today, I'm just going to quickly summarise their plots. So, The Keeper of Traken has the Doctor, played by Tom Baker, and new companion Adric, played by Matthew Waterhouse, just leaving E-Space, and leaving Romana and K9 behind. And they end up finding the new Decade Master, played by Jeffrey Beavers, who ends up possessing a Trakenite scientist, called Tremus, to get a new body, played by Anthony Ainley. Tremus' daughter, Nyssa, played by Sarah Sutton, is extremely confused on what is happening, and she eventually joins the TARDIS team in the following story, Logopolis. In Logopolis, Australian air hostess Tegan Javanka, played by Janet Fielding, is heading to her first day on the job at Heathrow Airport. However, the Master soon kills her aunt, and she eventually joins the TARDIS team, when she stumbles aboard. Long story short, the Master attempts to do some evil stuff, and the Doctor stops him, but he falls from a great height, regenerating into his new body. The purpose of this trilogy is to revamp the show with a completely new cast of characters, and bringing back the beloved Master from the Third Doctor era. The other things worth mentioning is that this was actually the fourth of the season to be filmed, so that the cast can get into their roles better, and to finalise the script, as many ideas were thrown around, with many scripts being The Visitor and Project Zeta Sigma to be the original name of this first story. The Blu-ray of the story adds two more things. The first is new updated special effects, which I'll get to when they show up, and it has deleted scenes, and this is how I stand on deleted scenes. I will not watch the deleted scenes unless they have been re-edited into their respected versions. For example, Black Orchid Part 1 has an extended cut, and I'll watch that cut, not the original, as that to me is the ultimate version that doesn't really take away the original effects. So, this story was released in 4 parts, starting in the 4th of January 1982 to the 12th of January 1982. This also begins a brand new schedule, with 2 episodes releasing per week, changing from just 1. This story was written by previous script editor Christopher H. Bidmead, who also wrote Logopolis before that. Also, this story is directed by Fiona Cumming, who had worked on many Doctor Who stories before this one. Jumping into episode 1, we have a pre-credit sequence, which I believe is the first of the series, of the 4th Doctor's regeneration, and a new title sequence, with the 5th Doctor's face in it. After this, the Doctor, Adric, Tegan and Nyssa try to bring the newly regenerated Doctor back to the TARDIS, but they are stopped by some security guards. But then, Tegan steals an ambulance, bringing the Doctor and Nyssa back. However, Adric is left behind when the Master shows up and kills the guards. I will say that the updated special effect is so much of an improvement, because the original one is very cheesy. So they end up going into the TARDIS, where we stay for the next episode and a half, which is very reminiscent of The Edge of Destruction, which was a story set entirely inside the TARDIS, with the main characters losing their minds and the spaceship getting sucked to the beginning of a solar system. But for this one, Adric is revealed to be an illusion by the Master, as he is captured by him, and the fake Adric sets the TARDIS towards Event 1, or the Big Bang. Then there is the Doctor, and this starts one of my least favourite trends in the show's history, the post-regeneration story. Basically, the Doctor has temporary amnesia and isn't in the right state of mind, and it takes the whole entire story for him to finally recover and be normal. This was something that only really happened for the first 10 minutes of previous post-regeneration stories, primarily Robot, as the Doctor forgets some stuff and then instantly moves on and remembers. This can cause audience members, like myself, to find it hard to resonate with this new Doctor, as we have to wait for the next story for him to be fleshed out. but I will say, him doing a William Hartnell impression and name-dropping previous companions is good fan service, but my favourite is when he imitates Patrick Troughton.
Not far now, Brigadier, if the Ice Warriors don't get there first. Oh no. Oh dear. We've wandered into the wrong corridor. We must be close to the main TARDIS drive now. Jamie, you go back.
No, I have to stay with you, Doctor.
No nonsense, be sensible, go back. When I say run, run. Don't you understand? The regeneration is failing.
After this, the Doctor puts on his cricket kit and his coat, making up his outfit, minus the celery, which will come up later on. Also, I might as well mention it, there is this hat that he wears, but he rarely wears it and it is extremely forgettable. So, the Doctor needs to go to this room in the TARDIS called the Zero Room, where he can relax and complete his regeneration. While this happens, we spend the rest of the first part with Tegan and Nyssa, and I will say that they have great chemistry, and I understand why everyone likes to ship them together. Also, Nyssa getting more to do is great, as she's done nothing in the last two serials. Another thing is that they find out Adric is captured by the Master, but they don't say anything to the Doctor for some reason. The episode ends with them finding out that they can't fly the TARDIS and that there's a huge hydrogen inrush, which is explosive to oxygen, meaning that they are a bomb ready to explode in Event 1. Now for part 2, it is split into two halves. The first half is still set in the TARDIS, where they wheelchair the Doctor out of the Zero Room to help pilot the TARDIS from being destroyed in Event 1, so they're forced to jettison 25% of the TARDIS to create more speed, but since the rooms are random, there's a chance that the console room can be jettisoned. Luckily it isn't, and when they escape Event 1, they find out the Zero Room was jettisoned, so they have to improvise. They find out that they can travel to Castrovalva, which is a city on this pink planet, which can help the Doctor recover. So Tegan tries her best to fly the ship, as Nyssa builds a Zero Cabinet, which is a coffin-shaped object that they can use to transport the Doctor into the city, and the Doctor floats inside of it, of course. Now, once they land, a few things need to be mentioned. Firstly, Castrovalva is a real city in Italy, but also a famous print by MC Escher with the same name, was also apparently on John Nathan Turner's wall, but that is apparently a coincidence. The whole idea is that it is a perfectly geometric village that lies on top of a mountain. So back to the story, Tegan and Nyssa get changed, but mainly Nyssa, as she takes off her little skirt and wears these trousers which she wears pretty much for the rest of her run, besides the end of it. So Nyssa and Tegan push the Doctor, who is floating inside the cabinet, which is on top of a wheelchair, towards Castrovalva, where on the way, Nyssa loses her little crown, and this also happens. I don't know why it got so much momentum to fall like that, but Nyssa ends up falling in, where she does this silly face, which reminds me that this is still a kid's show. So since the wheelchair is busted, they have to travel on foot, and Nyssa also takes off her jacket, finishing her costume transformation. Tegan and Nyssa leave the Doctor behind as they scout ahead to where they catch a glimpse of Castrovalva, and all I'll say is the CGI replacement looks amazing as well. Another noticeable thing is that Tegan and Nyssa are climbing around rocks for the rest of this episode, which would have been a pain since both of them were in heels. But anyway, the cliffhanger is that there are these warriors in the grasslands, and when the duo return, they find the Zero Cabinet is empty, and there is blood on the floor. Now, this cliffhanger isn't really resolved, as the Doctor is seen later looking fine, and eventually they all get caught and sent to the city, as well as bringing the Zero Cabinet. Inside the city, we meet some new faces. The first one we meet is Shardovan, who is the librarian of the city, and this is where we see the Doctor eat celery, which Peter Davison absolutely hated. Eventually, the Doctor is sent to the Doctor of the city, being Murgrave, who tries to bring him to good health. After this, we meet the Portreeve, who is a wise leader of the city, who I'll get into a little later. Also, there is Ruther, who is just there. The Doctor does get to see this ancient tapestry thing in the Portreeve's room, and it shows images of Nyssa and Tegan pushing the Doctor through the forest. Pretty much for the rest of this episode, it is just the three characters exploring the city, and the Doctor trying to remember stuff. But I will say, there is this scene which has some good direction.
No, don't turn around. Just listen and listen quickly. The Master mustn't find me here.
He's in Castrovalva?
He can find me anywhere because I'm still in his power. But you mustn't let the doctor know.
We have to tell him.
No, rescuing me can wait. Just listen. The doctor must remain in Castrovalva until his regeneration is complete.
Wait, I must get Tegan.
No, you mustn't tell anybody you saw me. Nobody, you understand?
Now Nissa almost immediately tells everyone about this, and everything goes haywire. This leads to the trio attempting to escape, but they're lost in circles. That's when the cliffhanger reveals that the city is collapsing in itself, and creating infinite loops, causing these cool visuals. Part 4 has a bunch of stuff to explain, which I'll try to do as fast as possible. So the Doctor attempts to read the history of Castrovalva and finds out that there's a bunch of nonsense, and that Shardavin fabricated it. But when confronted, he seems to be telling the truth. This leads to the Doctor try to have Murgrave sketch the outline of the city and explaining it to him, revealing it makes no sense to the outsiders. That's when they come to the realization that Castrovalva is fake, with artificial people living there. So the Doctor wants to confront the Portreeve, and when carried to him inside the cabinet, Nissa and Tegan get this reveal.
I contented myself with one small, simple town. For the final meeting of the Doctor with his master!
So this is the big spoiler / twist of the story, as it is revealed that the Portreeve is the Master all along. Now, I can't remember if I fell for this at first, but looking back at it, it is extremely obvious that the Portreeve is played by Anthony Ainley. But I will say, the production team tried their best to cover this up, as the Portreeve is credited as Neil Toynay, which is just an anagram of Tony Ainley. So, the Master tries to break into the cabinet, but the Doctor isn't inside, as he is breaking into the Portreeve's room another way. This leads to the Master just throwing the cabinet on the floor, causing it to break with books inside. The bigger question is that, why didn't he do that before? Anyway, when the Doctor arrives, he opens the tapestry revealing Adric stuck in the Hadron web, which is lethal to physical contact, and it is revealed that Adric created the entire city using his mathematical knowledge on block transfer computation, which was explained in Logopolis as creating objects and affecting space-time with mathematics. Eventually, Shardavin sacrifices himself by destroying the Hadron web, freeing Adric and beginning Castrovalva's destruction. Also, the Master attempts to flee in his TARDIS disguised as a fireplace, but can't, as the space around him is constantly changing, I think. So Murgrave and Adric lead the Doctor, Nissa and Tegan outside, as they know what is real and fake. But Murgrave stays behind, as he and the rest of the citizens of Castrovalva push the Master back into the city as it disappears. The four jog back to the TARDIS, where two plot holes occur. The first is that the Doctor pulls celery out of his coat and sticks it to his lapel, where it stays for the rest of his run. However, shouldn't this be fake and or disappear since it was created by Adric? It either means one of four things. Either 1, it was there before they travelled, 2, they found it on the way back, 3, it is completely fake, which doesn't make any sense, and 4, which I believe is the most reasonable answer, warriors gathered it from the land below and brought it up. The other plot hole is that Adric reveals that Tegan never flew the TARDIS and that it was always programmed to go to Castrovalva, as the fake Adric added it to a fake index file. This either means that the whole Event 1 nonsense was a trick by the Master, but his expression afterwards seems that they were surprised that he escaped, or it could have been a contingency plan, but it still makes no sense on why the Master even bothered with Event 1. Like, it makes no sense at all. But anyway, this overcrowded TARDIS team begins to depart, where the story ends with the Doctor believing that his new incarnation is absolutely splendid. Now, Castrovalva has many problems with it. The first being that it is really two stories smushed together, causing both to be underdeveloped. This means that when it is halfway through part 2, it feels like a completely different story, where it could have just been better if it was either one of these plot lines, or if the Castrovalva stuff was redone to where we don't meet the side characters until the second half of the story. Now, for the TARDIS team, I will say this is the beginning of the downfall of this team. This is an extremely overcrowded TARDIS with the Doctor and his 3 companions, And even when earlier Doctors had this same team number, it never worked, as always one companion was left out of the plot, and for this it was Adric. I think for this story that is pretty smart, so we can focus on the relatively new characters, because like I said earlier, Nyssa gets a lot to do, and Tegan continues her great streak that started in Legopolis. For the Doctor, it is really hard to talk about him. Like I said before, this begins a new trend which I hate, as the next 3 post-regeneration stories, which includes the movie, all have the Doctor act strange for the majority of it, meaning that we can never properly see them until their second story, or if you're Colin Baker, your third, or if you're Paul McGann, never, unless you count the books and Big Finish. Anyway, it still isn't that bad, and out of all post-regeneration stories of the 80s, this is by far the best, but for an overly complicated plot, it is a struggle for new viewers. This is because of the context that is needed from the previous 2 stories that are completely lost, meaning that if this is your introduction to the show, you will already be confused. Anyway, I've waffled for far too long, and that is why I'm going to give Castrovalva a 6 out of 10. Thanks for watching.